Imagine, if you will, your entire life being relegated by a foreign power that has already stolen the lion's share of your land. Imagine being confined to this little red strip here, okay? This is the Gaza Strip. Your entire life, from cradle to grave, is spent within this open air prison camp. Now, imagine, picture, you live up here, okay? The part above that little blue line there. 1.1 million people. 1.1 million people. The size of a pretty decent American city live north of this blue line. Now imagine that you are ordered by this same hostile military force to move south of the blue line. Do I think a ground invasion is coming? All signs point to that. So 1.1 million people live up here. Another chunk of Gaza's population lives down here. There's no water. There's no electricity. There is no food. You can't cross into Egypt. So you are trapped. And this enemy power, this Israel, is going to come into this little hunk of land that is your home, your only home. You've never left, and destroy it more than they already have with their jets and their artillery. That is what is getting ready to happen. This is a literal genocide. Like, there is no other way to define what is getting ready to go down, what has been going down. This whole area has been getting bombed for days. Days. I saw a post which said that more bombs have been dropped on Gaza in the past few days than during a year of the American occupation of Afghanistan. This is extremely bad. This is being done. Tens of thousands of people are getting ready to fucking die. And our tax dollars are underwriting this. Every time you get paid and you see that little hunk missing out of your paycheck, I want you to think, this helped kill people. Like, that's the only way I can put it. Israel has arbitrarily ordered the evacuation of 1.1 million people from the northern part of Gaza, according to the UN. Keep in mind, this is what they have been doing to Gaza over the past 3 days. This is the activity they've got going on. They bombed a refugee camp. These people have been forced out of their homes twice now. Some are even dead. Our tax dollars are paying for this. This is what we are paying for. We are getting ready to have to start paying student loan debt back again. You have Americans that have no food or water that are living in, I'm not even going to call it Gaza type conditions, because like no place in the United States looks this bad. No place looks this bad. I'm not going to say like Gaza conditions, because that doesn't happen. No place in the United States has been continuously bombed to rubble. But our own people are suffering and are fucked. And what we're doing is helping to make other people get suffered and fucked. Intolerable. So, yeah, not hundreds of thousands, millions, 1.1 million people. And they have 24 hours to do that. Imagine having only 24 hours to pack up all your shit and leave. What if you have an elder person who cannot move all that good? What if you have a small kid who's literally like 90% of the kids in Gaza have PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, a disease that originated among soldiers? 90% of these kids have PTSD. What can the Israelis do? They can just hop on a jet. They can just hop on a jet and leave. Or if you're a foreign national, you could just hop on a jet and leave. The Gazans have nowhere to go. So what Israel is doing, 423,000 people have been displaced. Soon that number is going to have to include the 1.1 million people that are being forced out of their homes in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. So this is one of the biggest humanitarian, one of the biggest refugee crises in modern history. 423,000 out of a population of 2.3 million. 2.3 million people are forced to live like this. 2.1 million people in this little bitty hunk of land the size of an American city. And I would like to make it very clear. If you have been one of those people that has been like, oh, it's both sides, both sides are wrong. Like, you are literally responsible for what's about to happen. Because what you're doing is you are carrying a false media narrative. Like, all of this shit about beheaded babies and Hamas. Like, none of that shit has happened. None of it. There have been no confirmed rapes committed by the Palestinian resistance. There have been no confirmed massacres of children. None of that shit is true. But the president of the United Motherfucking States released a statement saying that he never thought he would see little kids beheaded. He did not. His own press office released a statement saying that it was bullshit. So you've got this fake news being spread, and there's no pushback on it. If you put pushback, like, look what's happening to people. Zionists are attacking Palestinian activists and Palestine solidarity activists. So, Comrade Ikra sent me this. It's a media guide for covering the Palestinian situation. It says, Palestinians are Palestinian. Arab Israeli is an offensive label and should not be used. It erases Palestinian identity and confuses Palestinians with Mizrahi and Sephardic settlers. Palestinian citizens of Israel is often intentionally used to whitewash the Zionist regime as seemingly democratic. While Palestinians who are occupied often face constant harassment, policing. Oh, I'm covered up by the fucking chat box. I'll get it together one day, comrades. Anyways. I know you all want to see my fucking bald head. There we go. Anyways, Palestinians who are occupied often face constant harassment, policing, and exploitation. It is important to note Palestinians are unified across religion and region, and usage of skin tone identity is typically a Western framing. One must also be careful of how they label a Palestinian in the West, as American Palestinian is not chosen and serves as a compliance label to imperialism. Palestinians are not in the West willingly, and their aspiration is to return home across generations. It is important to respect in any interview. Interview and center Palestinians on the ground as a priority, since Palestinians are often spoken over or spoken for by insidious actors. Normalization, humanitarianism, and safety. Normalization means recognizing or engaging with the Zionist entity in any form. So people talking about Israel like it's an actual state that needs to be negotiated with, no. This is an illegal occupation. That is how we have to refer to and center Israel. Like talking about there's no such thing as an Israeli. Okay, there is no such thing as an Israeli. There is no such thing as an Israeli. Call them what they are, settlers. They could also go into the Palestinians' home and tell them to get out. Can you imagine something like that happening in the United States? I mean, they did it to my ancestors in the South. Like everything that Israel is doing, they practiced it and developed it here in the United States. By they, I mean the settlers. So settlers have similar methods of fucking people over. So yeah, I can't imagine that. Anyways, normalization is treasonous, and any suggestion of engaging with Zionists is considered normalizing the abuser. Organizations may claim a humanitarian approach, but must be examined for their funders, as many who claim to uphold Palestinian life. This. As many who claim to uphold Palestinian life do so to identify vulnerable Palestinians to exploit them. Organizations under the umbrella of New Israel Fund and Foundation for Middle East Peace must be referenced carefully with this in mind, as they often reflect normalization agendas. So again, we must avoid normalization of the occupation. We must consistently maintain in our propaganda and in our work that this is an illegal occupation. That is how we have to move. That is how we have to treat this situation. There is no normalization or engagement. Like, would we normalize and engage with fucking Nazi Germany? Of course not. Why? Because it's an illegal fascist state that's doing horrible things to people. So we have to treat Israel the exact same way. Be mindful of safety for Palestinians in the West should they be interviewed, as they are constantly surveilled, threatened, and blacklisted for any expression. Offer to allow anonymous positions, to blur out their photos, or to use false names to keep them safe from harassment and threats. Be mindful of photo and video from actions and protests. I understand that people want to be like, hey, look, I'm doing a thing. I stand with Palestine. Okay, but it's not funny when you're getting doxxed, when people are throwing shit through your windows, and people are egging your car, or doing even worse things to your car. Like, Zionists are nuts, okay? They will literally come and bust the windows out of your car and slash your tires. They may shoot up your house. Like, these people have no qualms about committing egregious acts of violence towards Palestinian people and their allies. Like, they will literally get you put out of school. I saw this black woman in New York. She lost her job at a prestigious law firm, and the dean of her law school denounced her. Like, these people are not playing. This is a war. So wear a keffiyeh. Cover your face. Wear sunglasses. Like, many of you all who have been in the movement for a long time, you all know basic security culture at demos. Seek permission before you photograph organizers or individuals, and provide options of safety. It continues. Remember the broader context of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood as an event that manifested from prior conditions, namely that it comes from the Joint Operations Room in Gaza that is comprised of many different factions, religions, and political ideologies, yet is united in principles of liberation, goals, and tactics. This Joint Operations Room is accountable to a transnational formation called Unity of the Fields. The conditions of Gaza and all Palestinians in the camps throughout the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, as well as those exiled, is manifested by over a century of settler colonialism that the United Kingdom and the United States have supported alongside NATO, the European Union, and others. The Joint Operations Room has constantly warned against Zionist violence, abduction of hostages, sieges, murder, and other atrocities for years now that have afflicted people throughout occupied Palestine, while the Unity of the Fields has amplified these warnings as people in Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Armenia, and elsewhere have also been attacked by Zionists. Despite these warnings, Zionist leaders have continued their violent aggression. Anti-Zionism means the dismantlement of the Zionist entity. Anti-Zionism does not mean post-Zionism or that the two sides are equal. It is never over until imperialism is over. It is not over until all land from the river to the sea has been returned to the indigenous Palestinians and the occupation has been totally dismantled. It is never over until imperialism is over. It is referred to as the Zionist entity or Israel in quotes because it is a colony. The name of Palestine and all of the Palestinian villages are the permanent names and will never be erased. This is how Palestinians refer to their ancestral lands and villages after Zionists ethnically cleansed the area in 1948. The Zionist entity encourages and rewards settlements with the support of the US, Europe, Ukraine, and elsewhere, despite warnings from the Joint Operations Room, with even the US issuing soft statements of staged accountability to the degenerate terms of the Oslo concessions against the implications of settlement expansion. To Palestinians, the entirety of the Zionist entity is a settlement. So land back means Palestine. Some people try to push back and challenge on that, like they're saying, oh, that's unworkable. It only works in no. Land back means land back in every settler colonial state. Equality is not the cause of Palestinian liberation. There is no potential equality between the colonized and colonizer. The Palestinian liberation movement seeks the complete return of ancestral homeland and the return of its people to this land. Palestinians do not view this as a movement of equality or ending apartheid. Liberal Zionists in their lobbies hope Palestinians buy into this agenda, but it is wholly rejected. The Zionist entity currently holds over 5,000 hostages in the occupation's prisons, including women and children. It tortures them, abuses them, sexually assaults them, withholds medical treatment, tries experimental substances on them, and is slowly murdering them. The resistance of Palestinians against violent settler colonialism is valid, and it is not the role of any journalist or figure or left organization to decry this response, but rather to understand its manifestations. The right to resist via armed struggle is enshrined in international law, UN Resolution 45/130. However, it does not need Western law nor institutions for validation, as this only centers the role of empire, colonialism, and capitalism. The Palestinian movement for liberation is against these institutions. The movement for self-autonomy is inherent to the years-long strategic formation of the Joint Operations Room in Gaza, the grassroots resistance throughout the occupied West Bank, the mobilization of Palestinians in historically occupied Palestine, and Palestinians everywhere. This is not a sudden war. This is a long and steadfast resistance movement against settler colonialism. The resistance has been consistent since the British invasion of Palestine and onward against settler colonialism. The Palestinian Authority is not an official government and does not represent the people. It is a product of U.S. imperialism and the conciliatory Oslo Accords. Israelis are only victim to their own supremacist free will and bad choices. All Israelis are settlers, and as settlers, they partake in the risks associated to stealing land and resources. There is no such thing as an innocent settler. Zionists often have dual citizenship and easily enjoy access to the United States, while people in Gaza and West Bank are trapped behind partition walls, military watchtowers, and surveillance mechanisms. All Zionists, with very few exceptions, must serve in the military. Section 5. Media Framing and Engagement. Framing this as Hamas Israel is intentional to lend towards Islamophobic campaigns, which currently have resorted to calling Palestinians barbaric and terrorists, terms that have been used against Palestinians and Arabs throughout their resistance journey. The revival of these terms is indicative of colonial insecurity to frame the native Palestinian as a caricature. The resistance is shoulder to shoulder, from Marxist to Islamic factions, responding to the call of Al-Qassam Brigade's Commander-in-Chief Mohammed Daif. during slavery, the majority of the people in the South was black. To bring democracy and equal rights would have meant majority of society would have been black represented, purely just through numbers. If Israel gave equal rights to the Palestinians, they would no longer be able to exploit and steal the land. Precisely, which is why they're not going to give Palestinians equal rights. Refuse both sides framing, because this is a severe power and resource imbalance. Zionists have nuclear capabilities and space weaponry and have been gladly selling and sharing this with other repressive movements around the world. Framing the victim must center settler colonialism. Cries from victimhood from Zionists and their apologetic allies often arise out of their own internal contradictions. A sound journalist must explore these contradictions, whether related to class, identity, or other forms of self-interest. So, very good. If I could brand this into everybody in DSA's brain, I would. Because, like, I've seen a lot of DSA members, like, who just don't fucking get it. Yes, most of them are. Most of them are. But, yeah, when you are saying things, you have to realize that words mean things. And you have to keep yourself from inadvertently parroting or even advertently parroting Zionist propaganda. So, what's going on in our neck of the woods? Well, Zionists are acting a fucking fool. Well, they always are acting a fucking fool. Brooklyn, New York. Police are investigating a possible hate crime attack in Brooklyn after a group of pro-Israel supporters allegedly beat up a man who yelled "Free Palestine" Wednesday night. The incident occurred on 86th Street and 4th Avenue around 11:30 p.m. when a car with people yelling pro-Israel remarks pulled up to the three men on the side of the street, according to the New York Police Department. So, yeah, be safe out there. Just a reminder that Hamas target means literally any 18-year-old man. This gives them free reign to flatten Gaza with a thumbs up from America. So, Israeli Air Force released these things. This looks like fucking... It looks like a fucking nuke just hit. Like, literally. Hundreds of thousands of people are now fucking homeless. Hundreds of thousands of people are now fucking homeless. So, two DSA statements. This is the national organization's statement that was released as soon as shit popped off. DSA is steadfast in expressing our solidarity with Palestine. Today's events, by today they mean the 7th, are a direct result of Israel's apartheid regime, a regime that receives billions in funding from the United States. In the violence, in the occupation, Free Palestine, we unequivocally condemn the killing of all civilians. Boo. It is imperative for international human rights law to be respected. Okay, so going back to what we saw before, refuse both sides framing. Framing this as Hamas Israel is intentional to trend towards Islamophobic campaigns. Framing the victim must center settler colonialism. Framing the hero must center settler colonialism. Israelis are only victim to their own supremacist beliefs. There is no such thing as an innocent settler. So, on that regard, the official statement is lacking. But we cannot forget that the Israeli state has systematically denied Palestinians the right to self-determination for decades. This was not unprovoked. For over 60 years, Palestinians have faced ethnic cleansing, torture, bombings, and housing demolitions. Gaza is still under a blockade. As socialists, we must act. The Not on Our Dime coalition campaign, advanced by New York DSA member and New York Assembly member Zoran K. Mamdani, provides an effective model for pressuring elected officials to stop providing financial support to the Israeli state. Take to the streets to join a protest for peace and against funding the Israeli state. Find out what actions local DSA and young DSA chapters are taking and join in. So, by and large, it's decent, garden variety statement. Something that you would expect from the national account of an organization like DSA. This is the the North Carolina Triangle DSA, the Research Triangle, Chapel Borough, Durham, and Raleigh. Decolonial struggle is neither a metaphor nor a dinner party. We mourn the innocents lost and pray for a day the Zionist entity falls. We have endorsed the Free Palestine rally at Moore Square, October 8th at 4 p.m., full solidarity with the Palestinian people. So, based statement. I give it an A. This is from North New Jersey. DSA statement on Israeli-Palestinian violence. Oh, let's see what chat is saying. Colonial oppression spans the world with its consequences. From Ireland to Palestine to South Africa to the Philippines, Korea, Vietnam, the imperialist colonial tactics come home through state oppression. Rubber bullets, kettling, tear gas, etc. were all born out of oppressing civilians militarily with a smile. I don't know. Are you going to smile at somebody while you're shooting them with a rubber bullet? I wouldn't. So, North New Jersey. DSA is steadfast in expressing our solidarity with Palestine. The past few days' events. There we go. The past few days' events are a direct result of Israel's apartheid regime, a regime that receives billions in funding from the United States. In the violence, in the occupation. I really like how they follow ending the violence with ending the occupation. Always put onus on the oppressor. The oppressor is the response, is the initiator of violence, even if it's committed by oppressed people as a response. The oppressor must always be found guilty. We unequivocally condemn the killing of all civilians. Like, is there like a factory that says this? Like, this sentence does not need to be here. We unequivocally condemn the killing of all civilians. It is imperative. Matter of fact, didn't I just read this? Did they just copy and paste from National? It's literally the same thing. Jesus, I'm tired. This is New York City. Statement. Peace now. End occupation and apartheid. NYC DSA believes in peace, equality, and freedom for all Palestinians and Israelis. We deeply mourn the loss of life in the region and unequivocally condemn all hatred and the killing of all civilians. Okay, like these statements would be so much better if they just take this part out. We deeply mourn the loss of Palestinian life in the region because, as the piece that I just read, there's no such thing as an innocent settler. There's no such thing as an innocent sailor. I saw this Israeli lady. She took 13 minutes to read off the list of dead IDF soldiers. Like Malcolm said, chickens coming home to roost never make me sad. They always make me glad. And unequivocally condemn all hatred and the killing of all civilians. Our sympathy and condolences go out to those who have lost loved ones or who have loved ones in harm's way. On Saturday, in anticipation of escalatory violence to come, we tweeted a promotion of a rally in solidarity with the people of Palestine. We understand why many, including our allies, were shocked by the timing and tone of this message in a moment of profound fear and grief. Why would you be shocked? Like, if you are shocked at Palestinian people speaking bitterness and their allies speaking bitterness and a joyous celebration of the impending fall of Israel, there's something wrong with you. That's not an ally. This is PR speak, as somebody in chat says. We are sorry for the confusion our post caused. Confusion among who? Like, who is confused? Are the Palestinian people confused? Sand war over useless sand. That sounds very racist. I don't like racists in my chat. You are banned. Anyways, we are sorry for the confusion our post caused and for not making our values explicit. Like, are you pro-Palestinian or are you not? Like, they're getting ready to go in and massacre all of these people. They ordered all of these people out of their homes. And here we are, hemming and hawing. Like, who has time for this shit? You do not have to. You don't have to do it. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't let anybody make you do it. Goofy. So all of these sound the same. And I lost it. Here we are. We are concerned that some have chosen to focus on a rally while ignoring the root causes of violence in the region. The far-right Netanyahu's governments escalating human rights violations, and explicitly genocidal rhetoric. Okay, so you're concerned, but you're also pandering to liberal Zionists. Gaza is now under a complete siege. The Israeli Defense Ministry announced it will cut off electricity, food, and water to over 2 million people, half of whom are children. The death toll is rising rapidly. No amount of violence, deprivation, or collective punishment will make everyday Palestinians and Israelis safe. Okay, here we are. You keep referring to the settler government as a legitimate entity. That is a no-no. You cannot do that. Equality is not the cause of Palestinian liberation. There is no such thing as an innocent settler. Framing this as Hamas Israel is intentional to lead towards Islamophobic campaigns. Refuse both sides framing because this is a severe power and resource imbalance. Framing the victim and the hero must center settler colonialism. New York statement shits the bed on that. No, no, no. We call for an immediate ceasefire to stop the senseless murder. Why are you not calling for the immediate cessation of the occupation? We call for the end of the 75-year Nakba that includes the occupation of the West Bank, the end of the 16-year siege on the open-air prison that is the Gaza Strip, and the end of U.S. military aid for occupation and apartheid. Okay, these are decent demands. That is the only pathway to safety and peace for all in the region. No, it is not. The only pathway to safety and peace for all in the region is a one-state socialist multinational Palestine, led by the majority. So, this is a caucus, a very bad caucus. They follow me for some reason. I don't know why, but I haven't blocked them because they provide some very hilarious takes sometimes. Pardon our French, but fuck Hamas. That fails on several levels. DSA members, the NPC is voting to revise this statement, the statement that I just read from the national body. Tell the NPC, the National Political Committee, to stop making statements, especially bad ones, and start protecting our people in office. So this is basically like when people talk about DSA being a bunch of liberals, this is who they're referring to, North Star. They're basically a bunch of old boomers and I think like a 20-year-old Latino kid runs their Twitter. Sometimes he's very funny. This they don't like. I'm going to talk about Emerge later, but DSA Emerge condemns bad faith attacks against Saturday's Palestine rally, which aimed to undermine calls for justice. We stand in solidarity with Palestinians struggling for liberation and allied orgs fighting against U.S. backing of military occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. DSA is funded by capitalist taxes. No, DSA is funded by membership dues. So this is a statement on the Times Square Palestine protest held on October 8th. Basically explains the reason for the protest. Like, this has basically been being attacked from people all over the country. With the passage of time, the righteousness of historic liberation struggles comes to be seen as obvious, inevitable, and undeniable. But as students of history, we understand how decolonization movements that are today celebrated as heroic, from South Africa to Algeria to Vietnam, were once announced as unconscionable, extremist, and senseless at the time they unfolded. We can understand this week's events only by situating them in the context of the ongoing capitalist taxes paid by Section 8. I'm going to block you. Dumb. I run my chat like a fucking gulag. We affirm it is our right to gather, rally, and protest in defense of Palestine. This is as much a moral right as it is a legal one. Efforts to smear and defame supporters of Palestinian liberation will enter the ledgers of history as shameful but ultimately surmountable roadblocks on the path towards true and lasting liberation. The BRG regime. Welcome, motherfuckers. We got cracker control and we got Zionist control. The whole world is watching and waiting for daylight to break on a free Palestine. Signed, Palestinian Youth Movement, the People's Forum, Al-Alda, the Palestinian Right to Return Coalition, National and New York, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Palestinian Assembly for Liberation, American Muslims for Palestine, New Jersey, and Answer Coalition. So, DSA is notably absent, unfortunately. But that's the nature of the beast and the nature of blind struggle. So going back, um, DSA, North Star Caucus, aka the crusty old liberals and one Latino kid, say that if you tail PSO, you lose credibility. No, you lose credibility when you are wishy washy. You allow your electeds to say stupid things and you don't take a hard line. Like, in the Maoists say that the left line must assert itself over the right. What this means is that the left line, the line represented by the International Committee, the line represented by people like myself and others who are unequivocally opposed to all manifestations of Zionism, including those within our organization. That means that we must assert ourselves over people like this who actually think that like this is something that's negotiable. Solidarity with Palestine is not negotiable. Oh, AOC.
Pretty
Let's see what she has to say. I personally cannot stand AOC's voice, but
states our responsibility is to the stability and the security of the region.
no, our responsibility is to get the fuck out of the region.
That means being able to support, not support, yes, is
See, this is why people think that we're a fucking joke. Support, yes, Israel. Like, what the fuck? Why is one of our elected saying this? Like, why? How is this acceptable at all? That violates basically every standard that in that journalist's like handbook that I just read.
Israel in its defensive capacities, right? In its ability in that context. But it also means that the United States has a responsibility to ensure accountability.
How the fuck are you going to ensure accountability to human rights? This country doesn't give a fuck about human rights. Neither one of these countries do.
To human rights, to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to...
How are you going to... Okay, this is a contradiction. You want to support Israel.
Yes, Israel in its
defensive capacities. What defensive capacities? It is a settler state. Its defensive capacities are the extermination, the literal extermination of the Palestinian people. So you want to have it both ways. This is the wishy-washy shit that I'm talking about.
Defensive capacities, right? In its ability in that context. But it also means that the United States has a responsibility to ensure accountability to human rights, to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to ensure that horrors do not happen in the names of victims who do not want their tragedy used to justify.
She just farted. Let's dial this back a bit.
Used to justify further violence and injustice.
Right.
Their tragedy used.
She just farted. God's grief. He needs to go sit her shitty booty ass down somewhere. So yeah, North Star is basically the far, far right of DSA. Don't listen to or join North Star. You also got this guy, Shri Thanedar. Today, I am officially renouncing my membership in the Democratic Socialists of America. After the brutal terrorist attacks on Israel, which included the indiscriminate murder, rape, and kidnapping of innocent men, women, and children. So this guy is basically a hardcore Zionist. Hardcore. Why was he allowed to join our organization in the first place? Like, why? I can no longer associate with an organization unwilling to call out terrorism in all its forms. Sunday's hate-filled and anti-Semitic rally in New York City, promoted by NYC DSA, make it impossible for me to continue my affiliation. This guy actually got kicked out. He got kicked out because he met with Modi, the fascist dictator of India. He was expelled from the branch that he was a member of. So he already wasn't a member. I don't think he'd been a member for like 2 or 3 months. But because he saw the opportunity to make hay with this situation, like this guy has not said anything about Palestinian people before this. But because he saw the opportunity to get some attention and get some clout, he put out this horrible shit. I stand with Israel and its right to defend itself. There is no place for moral equivocation in the face of the unadulterated evil as we have seen from Hamas. This guy was a DSA member until very recently. Like, why was this guy allowed into our organization? I will continue to work towards the goals that brought me to Congress in the first place. Universal health care, workers' rights, strong labor unions, equity for communities of color. I guess Palestinians are not included among communities of color. Environmental justice and compassionate immigration. My ideals have not changed at all. I strongly believe that ending my association with DSA serves my constituents' interests as they expect me to represent them by helping to build a better, more just world, not fanning the flames of hatred. Jesus fucking Christ. This guy, yeah, he was always just a fucking regular ass Democrat. Like, he was never a socialist of any type. And there's some tea on him. Let me find the tea. This guy, Adam Y. Abu Salah, was Shri's former communications director. I started working as Shri's comms director in his congressional office and quit in May. I can confirm this. During my first few days working for him, I knew I was in for an interesting ride. So, what is this? Rashida Tlaib called him out. She said that he is not putting in the work of a public servant and is leaving his working class communities across the district with no real advocate. Thanedar lies. So, in my first meeting with Shri and another staffer who also quit, he said, I don't care about policies or legislation right now. I just need you to focus on my reelection. Keep in mind, this is a DSA member. I always reminded him that congressional work and campaign work needed to be separate, but he didn't care. He would ask me every week to send official office e-newsletters to his campaign email list on MailChimp, and when I would tell him we couldn't do that, he would threaten to fire me and remind me that it's his office. Again, a DSA member. Now, let's talk about how Shri had a hard time retaining staff. At one point, 6 people quit from his office within 2 weeks, including an intern. When I quit from his office, he had 5 people on staff. For context, Congresswoman Dingell has 16. I once attended an event with him in Detroit. When we were walking up to the church and he saw a group of black men outside, he looked at me and said, "Will you take a bullet for me?" I looked at him and said, "Absolutely not." He was pissed. So you have a DSA member, a self-described socialist, who sees a bunch of black men and is like, he says, "Will you take a bullet for me?" More racism and misogynoir. Shri had a hard time trusting black women. When he would hire black women to deputy positions and they were well qualified to be director or chief of staff, he wouldn't promote them and would keep those positions open until he found a man, preferably white. Shri would always ask me to follow what Rashida Tlaib and AOC were doing so he could be popular like them and gain followers. He called me once past midnight to ask why AOC had over 10 million followers and he only had 3K. Probably because AOC isn't racist and has a personality. When he visited the southern border in April, he called me on his way there and started telling me Republican talking points. When I made him aware of that, he said, "Just tell me what the Democrats would like to hear." There's so much I could say, but what's important to know is that Shri is all about himself. He is the most ignorant, self-centered, and uninformed human I've ever worked with. And if you're wondering, yes, his hair is fake, it's a wig, and he killed the monkeys and beagles. So this guy was technically a comrade of mine. He's really just a career shill. Yeah. Cory Bush, congressman from the district next to mine. I am heartbroken by the ongoing violence in Palestine and Israel. She's making that mistake again. You do not refer to Israel without quotes or without using Zionist entity. And I mourn the over 250 Israeli, there is no innocent settler, and 230 Palestinian lives that have been lost today, and the thousands injured following attacks by Hamas militants on Israeli border towns and Israeli military bombardment of Gaza. I strongly condemn the targeting of civilians, and I urge an immediate ceasefire and de-escalation to prevent further loss of life. Our immediate focus must be saving lives, but our ultimate focus must be on a just and lasting peace for everyone in the region. Violations of human rights do not justify more violations of human rights. And a military response will only exacerbate the suffering of Palestinians and Israelis alike. The Israelis don't care. As part of achieving a just and lasting peace, we must do our part to stop this violence and trauma by ending U.S. government support for Israeli military occupation and apartheid. Okay, that's good. I'm continuing to closely monitor the situation, and my office is ready to support residents of the 1st District with family members and loved ones in the region. Okay. Decent, Cory. Yeah, I guess we can give her B plus, A minus. Very much for the better that he was not endorsed. Yeah, that would be embarrassing. So yeah, Cory gets a B plus. It could have been a little bit further to the left, but she's a black woman. I stand by black women. Here's this asshole again. So he's talking about why he quit. He didn't quit. He got kicked out. Look at him. That's a fucking wig.
Representative
We're going to listen to it.
Shri Thanedar. Why I Quit the Democratic Socialists of America Over Hamas Comments. By Shri Thanedar. That's enough. I couldn't believe an organization of which I was a proud member couldn't condemn the killing of civilians without putting all the blame on Israel.
All the blame is on Israel.
The scenes from the recent rally in New York City, promoted by the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, deeply disturbed me. Sitting miles away, I grappled with the evolving accounts of the event, where heightened anti-Semitic sentiments took center stage. The palpable support for the violence committed against Israel by Hamas, recounted through various sources, highlighted a growing polarization.
Shut up. Like, you're basically parroting. This guy should have never been admitted into our organization. Like, this guy's basically a Republican. He's basically a Rockefeller Republican.
In our societal beliefs. These accounts seemed almost surreal, a stark contrast to the America I've come to know and love. The recent horrific terrorist attacks on Israel shattered my heart. The indiscriminate slaughter, heinous acts of rape, and cold-blooded kidnappings of innocent souls, men, women, and children alike. How can I possibly align myself with an organization that unequivocally condemns killing civilians, but then blames the country where the victims were slaughtered? This is terrorism in its darkest.
I can't listen to this. I hope this guy gets primaried. And that is the least of what I hope happens to him, to be honest. San Francisco. DSA-SF stands in solidarity with Palestinians in their struggle for decolonization. We condemn Israel's ongoing occupation and the apartheid regime under which Palestinians are forced to live in dehumanizing conditions. And we further condemn the U.S.'s continued funding and support of Israel's decades-long colonization of Palestine. Okay, so good. So far, so good. Violent oppression inevitably produces resistance. Socialists support the Palestinian people's, and all peoples, right to resist and fight for their own liberation. This weekend's events are no different. Decolonization is the only path towards peace. A better world is possible. We call on those who share our vision of global working class emancipation to join the fight to end the occupation and decolonize Palestine from the river to the sea. DSASF is run by Marxist-Leninists. Last I know, pretty good chapter to my knowledge. Yeah, if I recall correctly, Red Star is from San Francisco. So this statement, solid A. Solid A work. They don't get an A plus because they did put Israel in quotes. Greater Baltimore DSA. Greater Baltimore DSA is unwavering in our solidarity with the people of Palestine in their decades-long fight. Hold on. Fix something. In their decades-long fight to end the occupation and obtain national liberation. We urge everyone to take a stand against apartheid Israel in this turbulent time. This conflict is one that was created by Western colonialists and the occupation government. It is the duty of socialists and everyone to oppose colonialism and apartheid. We demand an end to U.S. aid to the ethno-state of Israel. We demand all Palestinian prisoners held by the Zionists be released. We demand that our elected officials stand with us in working against the Israeli occupation. Okay, solid A. Solid A. Let's see who's next. I already did NC. North New Jersey. And I'm working ass backwards. Ah, this is Orlando DSA. They endorsed this statement. Yeah, Orlando DSA. Statement on Israeli violence and Palestinian resistance. This week's events in Palestine demonstrate that despite Israel's best efforts to stifle Palestinian resistance, no cage goes unchallenged. As we witness Palestinians, no, we have not read Red Star Mug's statements. I want to get the caucus statements later. As we witness Palestinians in Gaza break through the wall, holding more than 2 million people captive for the past 16 years, and Israel's subsequent indiscriminate bombing of the coastal enclave, it is critical that we acknowledge the true root cause of this week's violence. It is Israel's occupation, apartheid policies, and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people over 75 years that is the source of all violence. Rather than defend Palestinians' human rights, the United States consistently supports and enables Israel's genocidal regime. While Israel currently attacks Gaza with impunity, killing dozens of children and wiping out entire families across generations, it does so with the financial, military, and political backing of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Any analysis of the current events that does not acknowledge these facts is irresponsible, immoral, and dehumanizing. Looking at y'all, North Star. Israel's 16-year blockade on Gaza and apartheid occupation of Palestine is the root of all violence. Complicity in Israel's violent apartheid regime is not confined to politics in D.C. Florida politicians' uncritical support of Israel's apartheid regime and labeling of legitimate Palestinian resistance as unprovoked is violence in action. Politicians who want to continue to demand ironclad U.S. backing for Israel's military are enabling further violence. So-called progressive elected officials' failure to stand in solidarity with Palestinians rightfully seeking liberation allows repugnant politicians' barbaric incitement of violence against Palestinian and pro-Palestinian demonstrators to go unchallenged. To these cowardly politicians, some of which may be found within our own organization, we say, your language ignores the violence of Israel's occupation of Palestine, erases Palestinian suffering and right to resist, and enables the continued violence that Israel imposes on Palestinian lives. Your support of a settler colonial nation's right to carry out war crimes against millions of people forcibly living under its control puts you on the wrong side of history. Oppressed people everywhere will inevitably seek and win their liberation. Just like all peoples, Palestinians deserve freedom, safety, and dignity. In order to achieve liberation, we must address the occupation and U.S. complicity as the root cause of all violence. This was a banger. That's a banger. A+. Salt Lake DSA. When we revolt, it's not for a particular culture. We revolt simply because, for many reasons, we can no longer breathe. France Fanon, okay. Based. Quoting Fanon gets you an automatic A. Let's read the rest. The Salt Lake chapter of the DSA stands in unwavering solidarity with the people of Palestine in their decades-long fight for national liberation and urges the people of Utah and the United States to stand up against settler colonial Zionist apartheid. The Palestinian people have been held in apartheid since the establishment of the so-called State of Israel. So-called. Okay, that's good. Very good. State of Israel and the Nakba, Arabic for catastrophe, that followed. Millions of Palestinians have been removed from their homes, denied their basic human rights, and killed when they stood up against this tyranny upheld by the Israeli occupation. Israel is, per its constitution, an ethno-state, and it is not terrorism or anti-Semitism to fight against this injustice. The Palestinian people have shown us that no matter what walls Israeli forces may try to build to push the indigenous people out of their homeland, those walls can and will come down. We see this with the Palestinian people using bulldozers to tear down the fences surrounding Gaza. We see this every time Palestinians and their allies stand up in the face of violence, and we see this every time a smile crosses a Palestinian's face. The Palestinian people are resilient people, and it is our duty as socialists to stand with them. Apartheid structures will come down, and we will stand with the Palestinian people in their fight to tear down every structure used to uphold the apartheid they face. Anti-Zionism is a principled socialist position and one that Salt Lake City DSA takes seriously. Some of our members have worked with the DSA BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group and have relatives from Palestine themselves. It is also important for us because we are the only DSA chapter in Utah. Utah has its own history of settler colonialism, and much of the tactics and modern-day rhetoric Israel uses in their attempt to eliminate the indigenous Palestinians, the European Mormon settlers used against the indigenous Ute, Paiute, Goshute, Shoshone, Dine, Navajo, and Timpanogos peoples. It is an issue personal to us and to our history as a multiracial socialist organization in Utah. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. A+. More DSA chapters need to quote Fanon. All right. Let's see if I can stop working ass backwards here. Twin Cities DSA. Bit of a disappointment. Earlier this week, the Twin City DSA Steering Committee posted a statement in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Based on responses from both inside and outside our chapter, we would like to clarify our position. We want to be clear that this statement is from the Steering Committee and that no statements issued by Twin Cities DSA, including this one, are directly approved by or created in concert with any elected officials or candidates affiliated with our chapter, nor those of Twin Ports DSA. We grieve for those who have been killed in Israel and Palestine. Okay, I'm going to ding you for that one. We grieve alongside those whose lives have been torn apart by this bitter ongoing struggle. Who's responsible for the bitter ongoing struggle? The bloodshed of the last few days has been utterly devastating. Our Jewish and our Palestinian friends and family members, both here in the United States and abroad, are faced with astonishing loss and pain. We strongly condemn attacks on civilians by Hamas. Ding. In our previous attempt, we made a conscious choice to censor the lives of oppressed people in Palestine. Palestinians have suffered under colonial violence and apartheid for decades. However, not mentioning the mass death and kidnapping of Israeli civilians, ding, instead gave this impression that we were unconcerned about the tragic civilian casualties that have occurred as a result of Saturday's attacks. This is not the case, but we recognize the impact of our statement is more important than our intent. We also strongly condemn attacks on civilians by the government of Israel and the IDF. We stand in solidarity for the free Palestine because we want to see this violence ended. The current Israeli policy towards Gaza and the West Bank is one of apartheid and collective punishment and will continue to escalate this conflict. Our media fails to hold the lives of Palestinians killed by the IDF as sacred as Israeli citizens killed by Hamas. This is why it is so important to speak out in solidarity with Palestine. Just this week, Israeli officials announced that they will cut off electricity, food, and water from the 2.2 million people who live in Gaza, and only half of whom are children under 18. We remain concerned that the overwhelming response in the United States has been of unconditional support to the government of Israel, even as it pursues such atrocities. Did they hire a fucking PR firm to write this? The IDF siege of Gaza will only lead to more death and suffering, not peace. To condemn the actions of a government is not the same thing as condemning its people. We stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in all their forms. The actions of the government of Israel do not represent Judaism, just as the actions of Hamas do not represent all Palestinians or Muslims. Insisting Judaism and Zionism are equivalent, a racist to many Jewish people who are actively and vocally anti-Zionist. Holding American Muslims, including elected officials, through an increased scrutiny of having to explain that they are not terrorists, do not support war crimes, is racist and Islamophobic. To reiterate, anti-Semitism and violence against civilians has no place in the fight for a free Palestine. Twin Cities DSA, including our Jewish, Muslim, and Palestinian members, stand with people everywhere who are on the side of justice, freedom, and right to self-determination. Only when this occupation is ended can it be a just and lasting peace. Gonna give this a D+. D+. You shouldn't have recanted. Never, ever, ever let your political rivals or your political enemy make you recant shit. Why would you do that? It makes you look weak. Wista DSA. From the river to the sea, we unapologetically support Palestine's struggle for liberation from Zionist occupation and colonization. We call for an end to U.S. support for the Israeli apartheid regime and a principled stand and accountability from our elected officials. Israel has nuclear weapons. It's been armed to the teeth by the United States, and it seizes Palestinian land and property, restricts movement, and maintains its domination through detention, torture, and killings. Palestinians are under threat, not the existence of Israel. Okay, thumbs up. Palestinians cannot peacefully march as Israel responds with violence and massacres as in 2018. Israel takes away all other options from the colonized and then denounces the Palestinians returning to armed struggle. I already read it. I just don't need to read it out loud. I'm going to give this one a B+. It's pretty solid. Let me go and rank the ones that I've already read. Let's see. Official statement. B- because they're talking about civilians. I don't want to hear that shit. North Star F. Shri, Thanedar, F. Cory, what did I give Cory? A-. A-. San Francisco, A. Baltimore, A. NC Triangle, B+, because I don't like PSL. North New Jersey, C. New York City, C-. Orlando, A. Salt Lake, A+. Twin Cities, what did I give them? D+, C-, somewhere in there. Worcester, B+, A-. Zoran Mamdani. More than hundreds of people killed across Israel and Palestine in the last 36 hours. Ding. Netanyahu's declaration of war, the Israeli government's decision to cut electricity to Gaza, and Knesset members calling for another Nakba will undoubtedly lead to more violence and suffering in the days and weeks to come. The path towards a just and lasting peace can only begin by ending the occupation and dismantling apartheid. He's heading up the Not on Our Dime coalition, so gotta give him an A-. Fuck it. I'm an easy grader. Everybody wants to take my class. Bread and Roses, one of our caucuses. Bread and Roses stands with the Palestinian people resisting military occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. Dozens of civilians have already been killed today. We condemn the killing of any civilians and call for those responsible to be held accountable. But we refuse to pretend that this is a conflict between two equal parties, much less an act of aggression by the Palestinians. Okay, it's decent. I'm not mad at them. Palestinians have endured more than 60 years of shootings, bombings, house demolitions, torture. How's DSA LA? I don't know. I've heard that they're kind of overrun with Zionists. House demolitions, torture, and theft of their land at the hands of the Israeli state. They have lived for decades under a system of military occupation and apartheid designed to eliminate them as a people. Socialists in the U.S. must organize to end our government's long-standing support for these crimes. We are proud of NYC DSA's Not on Our Dime campaign led by DSA elected Zoran Mamdani. And we encourage all DSA and YDSA members to get involved in their chapter's BDS organizing. All people have the right to resist occupation. We offer full solidarity to the Palestinian resistance. There's no freedom for the working class of any country without freedom for Palestine. Okay, good internationalism. A. DSA Commie Caucus. I like these guys. Our caucus stands in solidarity with the Palestinian people's struggle for national liberation and emancipation. Their fight against military occupation, land disposition, ethnic cleansing, and racist apartheid are foundational aspects of the class struggle, past and present. This is on DSA LA. Falchi Koresh knows that they have an endorsed local elected who's showing her ass and attacking Palestine activists right now. Well, they need to unendorse her. Let's remember that it is the Palestinian people who are under threat due to the continued theft and occupation of land. The Israeli state enjoys the support of an expansive U.S. war machine, and it has leveraged these immense arms to dominate, exploit, and kill Palestinian people. The U.S. war infrastructures that support Israeli violence against Palestinians always boomerang back. They have also been used to dispossess, exploit, and dominate the working class of this country. Bringing it home. I like it. Police departments across the U.S. regularly make use of these same resources. The Palestinian struggle has a universal significance because it sits at a key hinge in imperialism that locks in the globe's working class, including our own, into a world premised on their exploitation and dispossession. Palestinians' fight is a message for all other emancipatory movements. It declares the dignity of all who stand up to capital's racism and fascism, and instead insists on building a world atop of equality and freedom. This capitalist world is not at all inevitable. Okay, that's dope. Give him an A. Leaning towards a plus. Red Star Mug Group's joint statement on the Palestinian uprising. Oof, you could tell these are like you could tell these are Marxist Leninists and pseudo cults. Longest one I've seen yet. Okay. Solidarity with Palestine in its ongoing struggle against colonization. Palestine will only be free when there is no territory held under Israeli apartheid, ending 75 years of oppression and occupation by the Zionist entity. Okay, good language. We support the right of the Palestinian people to defend themselves from harm and to determine their own fate. The United States is the dominant imperial power of the modern world, enriching itself through the exploitation of billions in the global south. Okay. The U.S. subsidizes the Israeli war industry through direct purchases and funding of over $3 billion a year, using Israel as a bulwark in West Asia and North Africa. Okay, so you got some geopolitical analysis. Excellent. While working class Americans, including millions of migrant workers and prisoners who are denied the right to suffrage, live with rising prices and stagnant wages. Bring it at home. Despite this, the Biden administration is currently pushing for additional military aid to crush the Palestinian uprising. Hundreds of Palestinians have been martyred. I really like this language already. Murdered by Israel in retaliation for the uprising. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has announced a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, calling its residents human animals. We reject calls to end the conflict without ending its sources, colonization and apartheid funded by the U.S. Israel and the United States rely on the Zionist narrative that any resistance to the occupation, from nonviolence movements like BDS to armed self-defense, amounts to terrorism. This shifts the blame to Palestine, forcing anti-Zionists to defend against accusations that they hold anti-Semitic views or condone violence against civilians, while Israel commits genocide against the people of Palestine and marginalizes Jewish anti-Zionists. In the past few days, we have seen leaders within the Democratic Party crawl out of the woodwork to denounce anti-Zionist activists, including DSA, as supporters of terrorism. This echoes the repression of the Stop Cop City movement in Atlanta, where activists fighting police occupation and environmental destruction now face charges of domestic terrorism. There is a clear possibility on the horizon that the state will level terrorism charges against the Palestinian Solidarity Movement for nonviolent mobilization, and we need to stand ready to defend our comrades. I love it so far. We call on DSA's nationally endorsed elected representatives to vote no on any funding for Israel. The responsibility of socialists in office is to agitate for mass action against U.S. imperialism and to do everything in their power to block the war machine. As DSA members, we pledge to join them in this fight, mobilizing in the streets and protecting them from Zionist attacks. Only a mass movement for the end of the U.S. empire can bring peace, and our task is to build it. When making decisions with DSA, both of our caucuses follow two guiding principles: the centrality of fighting imperialism and the necessity of democracy and transparency. As the largest socialist organization in the United States, it is DSA's responsibility to lead the fight against atrocities committed in the name of democracy here and in occupied Palestine. Both nations were real democracies denied to the majority of the population and powers held by the capitalist class. The Zionist lobby's aim is to discipline DSA for supporting Palestinian liberation. We will not back down under pressure. It is imperative that DSA take this opportunity to chart a new path forward and correct our previous missteps, demonstrating our unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian liberation struggle. To this end, the NPC members from our caucuses introduced a resolution to do the following: issue a longer form NPC statement on the current situation that demonstrates unwavering support for Palestine and calls on DSA members to fight for the Palestinian right to resistance and against the Israeli settler-colonial occupation. Brief DSA elected officials at all levels on the context and history of the occupation, DSA's democratically decided positions, and how they can effectively lead the fight for Palestinian liberation. And 3, call upon our congressional elected officials to vote against all military aid to Israel and reassert that voting for military aid violates the organization's democratically decided principles and is grounds for disciplinary measures. Okay, I like it. So these are options that have some teeth. You don't do what we want you to, get a spanking. That's what you do when you're in an organization. While we were disheartened that the collaboratively amended statement would not be put forward as an official position, The most urgent issue now facing us is that our resolution represented the only plan of action for supporting our socialists in office in their fight to block funding to the Israeli war machine. This applies particularly to Cory Bush, aka Homegirl, and Rashida Tlaib, who have come under fire for their immensely brave stances against Zionist apartheid. So, yeah, this gets an A+. Probably the best one I've read so far. DSA Emerge. They're out of New York City. DSA Emerge condemns bad faith attacks against Sunday's Palestine rally, which aimed to undermine calls for justice. We stand in solidarity with Palestinians struggling for liberation and allied organizations fighting against U.S. backing of military occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. As Israel commits genocide in Gaza, opportunistic attacks against the right to protest are becoming dangerously common. We must confront the attempts to disenfranchise protesting our own government's role and come together across differences to stand in solidarity with Palestine. Where was Mug Red Star again? Here, I'll link it in the chat. There you go. Read at your leisure. Boston DSA. Boston DSA stands with Palestine. Israel has long subjected Palestinians to apartheid, military operation, open-air prison conditions, and other atrocities. We must fight to end U.S. support, military or otherwise, for Israel. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Okay. Stock shit. C. Average, nothing to write home about. Connecticut DSA. Yesterday, the Palestinian resistance launched an unprecedented anti-colonial struggle. Despite 75 years of occupation, Palestinians are standing tall against apartheid. On Indigenous Peoples Day, we are gathering in solidarity on New Haven Green. No peace on stolen land. DSA started a Hamas caucus. I want to join. So, yeah, again, B, because it mentions Indigenous peoples. So, by and large, the most advanced statements came out from the caucuses that have communist membership. Branches are hit and miss. Probably the most advanced branch, it would be Salt Lake City. The most backwards position, obviously, is North Star shit. Our electeds are touch and go because they're like inspired so much by like what the enemy thinks of them. And I get it. They're elected officials. But I'm not an elected official, so I can say whatever the fuck I want. Well, I'm not an elected official yet. If anybody's insane enough to elect me in anything, that might change. But, yeah. All eyes on Gaza. Because shit's going to get bad. It's going to get real bad. So, hug your family close. Some people can't. If you don't have a family, hug your cat close, or your dog, or whatever creature you find fit to share your life with. I'm BRG.